Today, our topic is the branch of the United States Armed Forces, the Marine Corps, which have to launch the amphibious operations and have to conduct the expeditionary actions against the adversaries. Basically, the Marine Corps has been a component of the U.S. Department of the Navy since 30 June 1834. Working closely with the naval forces, the USAMC operates installations on land and aboard sea-going amphibious warfare ships around the world. Additionally, several of the Marine's tactical aviation squadrons, primarily Marine fighter attack squadrons, are also embedded in Navy carrier air wings and operate from the aircraft carriers. The history tells us the Marine Corps began when two battalions of the Continental Marines were formed on 10 November 1775 in Philadelphia as a service branch of infantry troops capable of fighting both at sea and on shore. In the Pacific Theater of World War II, the Corps took the lead in a massive campaign of amphibious warfare, advancing from Iceland to Iceland. As of 2017, the USAMC has around 186,000 active duty members and some 38,500 personnel in reserve. Originally introduced under the National Security Act of 1947 and outlined in 10 USC 5063, the three military areas of responsibility for the Marine Corps are seizure or defense of advanced naval bases and other land operations to support naval campaigns, development of tactics, technique, and equipment used by amphibious landing forces in coordination with the Army and Air Force, and such other duties as the President or Department of Defense may direct. The last clause derives from similar language in the Congressional Acts for the better organization of the Marine Corps of 1834 and establishing and organizing a Marine Corps of 1798. In 1951, the House of Representatives Armed Services Committee called the clause one of the most important statutory and traditional functions of the Marine Corps. It noted that the Corps has more often than not performed actions of a non-naval nature, including its famous actions in Tripoli, the War of 1812, Chapultepec, and numerous counterinsurgency and occupational duties such as those in Central America. World War I and Korean War, while these actions are not accurately described as sport of naval campaigns nor as amphibious warfare, their common thread is that they are of an expeditionary nature, using the mobility of the Navy to provide timely intervention in foreign affairs on behalf of American interests. The Marine Band, dubbed the President's Own by Thomas Jefferson, provides music for state functions at the White House. Marines from ceremonial companies A and B, quartered in Marine Barracks, Washington, D.C., guard presidential retreats, including Camp David, and the Marines of the Executive Flight Detachment of HMX-1 provide helicopter transport to the President and Vice President with the radio call signs Marine 1 and Marine 2 respectively. The Executive Flight Detachment also provides helicopter transport to cabinet members and other VIPs. By authority of the 1946 Foreign Service Act, the Marine Security Guards of the Marine Embassy Security Command provide security for American embassies, legations, and consulates are at more than 140 posts worldwide. The relationship between the Department of State and the U.S. Marine Corps are nearly as old as the Corps itself. For over 200 years, Marines have served at the request of various Secretaries of State after World War II and allowed disciplined forces was needed to protect American embassies, consulates, and legations throughout the world. In 1947, a proposal was made that the Department of Defense furnishes Marine Corps personnel for Foreign Service Guard duty under the provisions of the Foreign Service Act of 1946. A formal memorandum of agreement was signed between the Department of State and the Secretary of Navy on 15 December 1948, and 83 Marines were deployed to overseas missions. During the first year of the MSG program, 36 detachments were deployed worldwide. The expeditionary missions in history, the Marine Corps was founded to serve as an infantry unit aboard naval vessels and was responsible for the security of the ship and its crew by conducting offensive and defensive combat during boarding actions and defending the ship's officers from mutiny. To the latter end, their quarters on the ship were often strategically positioned between the officers' quarters and the rest of the vessel. Continental Marines manned raiding parties both at sea and ashore. America's first amphibious assault landing occurred early in the Revolutionary War on 3 March 1776 as the Marines gained control of Fort Montague and Fort Nassau, a British ammunition depot, and naval port in New Providence, the Bahamas. The role of the Marine Corps has expanded significantly since then, as the importance of its original naval mission declined with changing naval warfare doctrine and the professionalization of the naval service. The Corps adopted by focusing on formally secondary missions ashore. The advanced base doctrine of the early 20th century codified their combat duties ashore, outlining the use of Marines in the seizure of bases and other duties on land to support naval campaigns. Throughout the late 19th and 20th centuries, Marine detachments served aboard Navy cruisers, battleships, and aircraft carriers. Marine detachments served in their traditional duties as a ship's landing force, manning the ship's weapons and providing shipboard security. Marine detachments were augmented by members of the ship's company for landing parties, such as the first Sumatran expedition of 1832 and continuing in the Caribbean and Mexican campaigns of the early 20th centuries. Marines would develop tactics and techniques of amphibious assault on defending coastlines in time for use in World War II. During World War II, Marines continued to serve on capital ships. They often were assigned to man anti-craft batteries. In 1950, President Truman responded to a message from Representative Gordon L. MacDonough. MacDonough had urged President Truman to add Marine representation on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. President Truman, writing in a letter addressed to Rep. MacDonough, stated that the Marine Corps is Navy's police force, and as long as I am president, that is what it will remain. They have a propaganda machine that is almost equal to Stalin's. Representative MacDonough then inserted President Truman's letter dated August 29, 1950 into the congressional record. Congressmen and Marine organization reacted, calling President Truman's remarks an insult and demanded an apology. Truman apologized to the Marine Commandant at the time, writing, "I sincerely regret the unfortunate choice of language which I used in my letter of August 29 to Congressman Gordon MacDonough concerning the Marine Corps." While Truman had apologized for his metaphor, he did not alter his position that the Marine Corps should continue to report to the Navy Secretary. He made amends only by making a surprise visit to the Marine Corps League a few days later, when he reiterated When I make a mistake, I try to correct it. I try to make as few as possible. He received a stunning ovation. When gun cruisers were retired by the 1960s, the remaining marine detachments were only seen on battleships and carriers. Its original mission of providing shipboard security finally ended in the 1990s. The capabilities of the Marine Corps that fulfills a critical military role as an amphibious warfare force. It is capable of asymmetric warfare and conventional, irregular, and hybrid forces. While the Marine Corps does not employ any unique capabilities, as a force it can rapidly deploy combined arms task force to almost anywhere in the world within days. The basic structure for all deployed units is a Marine Air-Ground Task Force that integrates a ground combat element, an aviation combat element, and a logistic combat element under a common command element. While the creation of joint commands under the Goldwater-Nichols Act has improved inter-service coordination between each branch, the Corps' ability to permanently maintain integrated multi-element task forces under a single command provides a smoother implementation of combined arms warfare principles. The close integration of the disparate marine units stems from an organizational culture centered on the infantry. Every other marine capability exists to support the infantry. Unlike some Western militaries, the Corps remained conservative against theories proclaiming the ability of new weapons to invade independently. For example, marine aviation has always been focused on close air support and has remained largely uninfluenced by air power theories proclaiming that strategic bombing can single-handedly win wars. The focus on the infantry is matched with the doctrine of every marine is a rifleman, a focus of Commandant Alfred M. Gray Jr., emphasizing the infantry combat abilities of every marine. All marines, regardless of military specialization, receive training as a rifleman, and all officers receive additional training as infantry platoon commanders. For example, at Wake Island, when all of the marine aircraft were destroyed, pilots continued the fight as group officers, leading supply clerks and cooks in a final defensive effort. Flexibility of execution is implemented via an emphasis on commander's intent as a guiding principle for carrying out orders, specifying the end state but leaving open the method of execution. The amphibious assault techniques developed for World War II evolved with the addition of air assault and maneuver warfare doctrine into the current operational maneuver from the sea doctrine of power projection from the seas. The Marines are credited with the development of helicopter insertion doctrine and were the earliest in the American military to widely adopt maneuver warfare principles, which emphasize low-level initiative and flexible execution. In light of recent warfare that has strayed from the Corps' traditional missions, it has renewed an emphasis on amphibious capabilities. The Marine Corps relies on the Navy for sea lift to provide its rapid deployment capabilities. In addition to basing a third of the fleet marine forces in Japan, marine expeditionary units are typically stationed at sea, so they can function as first responders to international incidents. To aid rapid deployment, the marine pre-positioning system was developed. Fleets of container ships are positioned throughout the world with enough equipment and supplies for a marine expeditionary force to deploy for 30 days. The USMC, the United States Marine Corps, is planning to reduce its logistical requirements and by 2025 eliminate all liquid fuel uses for marine expeditionary forces except for highly efficient vehicles. Doctrine. Two small manuals published during the 1930s would establish United States Marine Corps doctrine in two areas: the Small Wars Manual, laid the framework for marine counterinsurgency operations from Vietnam War to Iraq and Afghanistan, while the tentative landing operations manual established the doctrine for the amphibious operations of World War II. Operational maneuver from the sea is the current doctrine of power projection. In the historical glimpses and the traces of the Marine Corps and its roots to the Continental Marines of the American Revolutionary War formed by Captain Samuel Nichols by a resolution of the Second Continental Congress on 10 November 1775 to raise 2 battalions of Marines. This date is celebrated as the birthday of the Marine Corps. Nichols was nominated to lead the Marines by future President John Adams. By December of that year, Nichols raised 1 battalion of 300 men by recruitment in his home city of Philadelphia. In January, the Marines went to sea under the command of Commodore Isaac Hopkins, and in March 1776 undertook their first amphibious landing, the Battle of Nassau in the Bahamas, occupying the British port of Nassau for 2 weeks. On 3 January 1777, the Marines arrived at the Battle of Princeton, attached to General John Cadwalader's brigade, where they had been assigned by General George Washington. By December 1776, Washington was retreating through New Jersey and, in desperate need of veteran soldiers, had ordered Nichols and the Marines to attach themselves to the Continental Army. The Battle of Princeton, where the Marines, along with General Cadwalader brigade, was personally rallied by Washington, was the first land combat engagement of the Marines. An estimated 130 Marines were present at the battle. At the end of the American Revolution, both the Continental Navy and Continental Marines were disbanded in April 1783. The institution itself would not be resurrected until 11 July 1798. At that time, in preparation for the cohesive war with France, Congress created the United States Marine Corps. Marines had been enlisted by the War Department as early as August 1797 for service in the new-built frigates, authorized by the Congressional Act to provide a naval armament of 18 March 1794, which specified the numbers of Marines to recruit for each frigate. The Marines' most famous action of this period occurred during the First Barbary War, 1801-1805, against the Barbary pirates, when William Eaton and First Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon led 8 Marines and 500 mercenaries in an effort to capture Tripoli. Though they only reached Derna, the action at Tripoli has been immortalized in the Marines' hymen and the Mamluk sword carried by Marine officers. The 1812 War and the aftermath. During the war, 1812, Marine detachment on Navy ships took part in some of the great frigate duels that characterized the war, which were the first and last engagements of the conflict. Their most significant contribution, however, was holding the center of General Jackson's defensive line at the 1815 Battle of New Orleans. The final major battle and one of the most one-sided engagements of the war, with widespread news of the battle and the capture of the HMS Cyane, HMS Levant, and HMS Penguin. The final engagements between British and US forces, the Marines had gained a reputation as expert marksmen, especially in defensive and ship-to-ship actions. They played a large role in the 1813 defense of Sackett's Harbor, New York, and Norfolk and Portsmouth, Virginia, also taking part in 1814 defense of Plattsburgh in the Champlain Valley during one of the final British offensives along the Canadian-American border. After the war, the Marine Corps fell into a malaise that ended with the appointment of Archibald Henderson as its fifth commandant in 1820. Under his tenure, the Corps took an expeditionary duties in the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, Key West, West Africa, the Falkland Islands, and Sumatra. Commandant Henderson is credited with thwarting President Jackson's attempts to combine and integrate the Marine Corps with the Army. Instead, Congress passed the Act for the Better Organization of the Marine Corps in 1834, stipulating that the Corps was part of the Department of the Navy as a sister service to the Navy. This would be the first of many times that the independent existence of the Corps was challenged. Commandant Henderson volunteered the Marines for service in the Seminole Wars of 1835, personally leading nearly half of the entire Corps, 2 battalions to war. A decade later, in the Mexican-American War, 1846-1848, the Marines made their famed assault on Chapultepec Palace in Mexico City, which would be later celebrated as the Halls of the Montezuma in the Marines' Hain. In fairness to the U.S. Army, most of the troops who made the final assault at the Halls of the Montezuma were soldiers and not Marines. The American forces were led by Army General Winfield Scott. Scott organized 2 storming parties of about 250 men, each of 500 men total, including 40 Marines. In 1850s, the Marine would see further service in Panama and Asia and attacked with Matthew Perry's East India Squadron on its historic trip to the Far East. The Marine Corps played a small role in the Civil War, 1861-1865. Their most prominent task was the blockade duty. As more and more states seceded from the Union, about a third of the Corps officers left the United States to join the Confederacy and form the Confederate States Marine Corps, which ultimately played little part in the war. The battalion of the recruits found for the First Battle of Bull Run performed poorly, retreating with the rest of the Union forces. Blockade duty included sea-based amphibious operations to secure forward bases. In late November 1861, Marines and sailors landed a reconnaissance in force from the USS Flag at Tybee Island, Georgia, to occupy the lighthouse and Martello Tower on the northern end of the island. It would later be the Army base for bombardment of the Fort Pulaski. In April and May 1862, Union Marines participated in the capture and occupation of New Orleans and the occupation of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, signal events in the war that helped secure Union control of the lower Mississippi River basin and denied the Confederacy a major port and naval base on the Gulf Coast. The remainder of the 19th century was marked by the declining strength and introspection about the mission of the Marine Corps. The Navy's transition from sail to steam put into question the need for Marines on naval ships. Meanwhile, Marines served as a convenient force sources for interventions and landings to protect American interests overseas. The Corps was involved in over 28 separate interventions in the 30 years from the end of the American Civil War to the end of the 19th century. They would be called upon to stem political and labor unrest within the United States. Under Commandant Jacob Zeeland's tenure, marine customs and traditions took shape. The Corps adopted the Marine Corps emblem on 19 November 1868. It was during this time that the Marines' Hain was first aired. About 1883, the Marines adopted their current motto, Semper Fidelis. It means faithful always. The musician and composer John Philip Sousa enlisted as a Marine apprentice at the age of 13, serving from 1867 until 1872 and again from 1880 to 1892. as the leader of the Marine Band. During the Spanish-American War 1898, Marines led American forces ashore in the Philippines, Cuba, and Puerto Rico, demonstrating their readiness for deployment. At Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, the Marines seized an advanced naval base that remains in use today. Between 1899 and 1916, the Corps continued its record of participating in foreign expeditions, including the Philippines-American War, Boxer Rebellion in China 1899-1901, and Panama, the Cuban pacifications, the Perdicaris incident in Morocco, Veracruz, Santo Domingo, and Banana Wars in Haiti and Nicaragua. The experiences gained in counterinsurgency and guerrilla operations during this period were consolidated into the small wars. The Korean War of 1950-53 saw the hastily formed Provincial Marine Brigade holding the defensive line at the Pusan perimeter to execute a flanking maneuver. General Douglas MacArthur called on United Nations forces, including U.S. Marines, to make an amphibious landing at Incheon. The successful landing resulted in the collapse of the North Korean lines and the pursuit of North Korean forces north near the Yalu River until the entrance of the People's Republic of China into the war. Chinese troops surrounded, surprised, and overwhelmed the overextended and outnumbered American forces. The U.S. Army's X-Corps, which included the 1st Marine Division and the Army's 7th Infantry Division, regrouped and inflicted heavy casualties during their fighting withdrawal to the coast, known as the Battle of Cochin Reservoir. The fighting calmed after the Battle of the Cochin Reservoir, but late in March 1953, the relative quiet of the war was broken when the People's Liberation Army launched a massive offensive on 3 outposts managed by the 5th Marine Regiment. These outposts were codenamed Reno, Vegas, and Carson. The campaign was collectively known as the Nevada Cities Campaign. There was brutal fighting on Reno Hill, which was eventually captured by the Chinese. Although Reno was lost, the 5th Marines held both Vegas and Carson through the rest of the campaign. In this one campaign, the Marines suffered approximately 1,000 casualties and might have suffered much more without the U.S. Army's Task Force 5th. Marines would continue battle of the attrition around the 38th parallel until the 1953 armistice. The Korean War saw the Corps expand from 75,000 regulars to a force of 261,000 Marines, mostly reservists. 30,544 Marines were killed or wounded during the war, and 42 were awarded the Medal of Honor. The Marines and the Vietnam War. Marine Corps served in the Vietnam War, taking part in such battles as the Battle of U and Battle of Khe Sanh in 1968. Individuals from the United States Marine Corps generally operated in the northern 1st Corps regions of South Vietnam. While there, they were constantly engaged in a guerrilla war against the Viet Cong, along with an intermittent conventional war against the North Vietnamese Army. Portions of the Corps were responsible for the less-known Combined Action Program that implemented unconventional techniques for counterinsurgency and worked as military advisor to the Republic of the Vietnam Marine Corps. Marines were withdrawn in 1971 and returned briefly in 1975 to evacuate Saigon and attempt a rescue of the crew of the Mayaguez. Vietnam was the longest war up to that time for Marines. By its end, 13,091 had been killed in action, 51,392 had been wounded, and 57 medals of honor had been awarded due to policies concerning rotation. More Marines were deployed for service during Vietnam than World War VIII. While recovering from Vietnam, the Corps hit a detrimental low point in its service history, caused by courts martial and non-judicial punishments related partially to increased unauthorized absences and desertions. During the war, overhauling of the Corps began in the late 1970s, discharging the most delinquent, and once quality of new recruits improved, the Corps focused on reforming the NCO Corps, a vital functioning part of its forces. On 11 September 2001, President George W. Bush announced the global war on terrorism. The stated objective of the global war on terror is the defeat of Al-Qaeda, other terrorist groups, and any nation that supports or harbors terrorists. Since then, the Marine Corps, alongside the other military services, engaged in global operations around the world in support of that mission. In World War II, the Marines performed a central role in the Pacific War, along with the U.S. Army in the battles of the Guadalcanal, Bougainville and Tarawa, Guam, Tinian, Cape Gloucester, Saipan, Pilaliu, and Iwo Jima and Okinawa saw fierce fighting between Marines and the Imperial Japanese Army. Some 6 lakh Americans served in the U.S. Marine Corps in World War II. In World War I, Marines served as a part of the American Expeditionary Force under General Pershing. When America entered into the war on 6 April 1917, the Marine Corps had a deep pool of officers and NCOs, non-commissioned officers with battle experience, and experienced a large expansion. During the war, the Marines fighting on Western Front in France fought at the battle at Belleau Wood in mid-1918. How the Marines and U.S. media reported that Germans had nicknamed them the Teufelhunden, as meaning devil dogs, for their reputation as shock troops and marksmen at range up to 1900 meters. There is no evidence of this in German records, as Teufelshunde would be the proper German phrase. Nevertheless, the name stuck in U.S. Marine lore. The U.S. Marine Corps is one of the 8 uniformed services of the United States Armed Forces. It originated since 10 November 1775. The size of the Marine Corps is 1,82,000 active personnel as of 2017 and 38,500 reserve personnel and 1,304 marine and marine manned aircraft. Total includes 11 VH-3D and 8 VH-16N of HMX-1 not listed by WAF 2018. It is the department of the Navy in which Marine Corps are attached. Headquarters, the Pentagon, Arlington County, Virginia. Nicknames: Jarheads, Devil Dogs, and Teufelhunden, and Leathernecks. Semper Fidelis is the motto, and the colors scarlet and gold. Its anniversaries are celebrated on 10 November. The equipment is a long list. Engagements: American Revolutionary War, Quasi War, First Barbary War, War of 1812, Second Barbary War, West Indies anti-piracy operations, Seminole Wars and African anti-slavery operations, Aegean Sea anti-piracy operations, First Sumatran Expedition, Second Sumatran Expedition, United States Exploring Expeditions, Capture of Monterey, Mexican-American War, Bombardment of Greytown, Battle of Tri-Ho Bay, First Fiji Expedition, Second Opium War, Second Fiji Expedition, Paraguay Expedition, Reform War, John Brown's Raid, American Civil War, bombardment of Khwai Nahon, Shimonosky campaign, Formosa expedition, United States expedition to Korea, Egyptian expedition 1882, Bering Sea anti-poaching operations, Kingdom of Hawaii, overthrow, Second Samoan Civil War, Banana War, Spanish-American War, Second occupation of Cuba, Border War, Negro Rebellion, occupation of Nicaragua, occupation of Haiti, occupation of the Dominican Republic 1916, Sugar Intervention, Philippine-American War, Boxer Rebellion, World War First, Second and Russian Civil War, Korean War, Vietnam 1958, Lebanon Crisis, occupation of the war, Dominican Republic, Iranian hostage rescue, multinational force in Lebanon, Operational Argent Fury 1986, bombing of Libya, Tanker War, Ernestville, Prime Chance, Eager Glacier, Nimble Archer, Praying Mantis, Operation Just Cause, Persian Gulf War, Somali Civil War, Iraqi no-fly zones, Bosnian War, Kosovo War, International Force War for East Timor, Operation Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan, Philippines, Horn of Africa, Pankasi, Gorge, Trans-Sahara, Caribbean and Central America, Iraq War, Pakistan, United States Circumambitious, Operation Odyssey, Dawn 2014 intervention against ISIL, Operation Inherent Resolve Support Mission, Battle of Khasham.